I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network.
So, Dave McClure, welcome to the James Altucher Show.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So, Dave, I'm going to give a little intro for you just in case people may or may not know who you are, but you're one of the most well-known venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. But you've had, lots of ups and downs. Your venture capital firm, 500 Startups, is invested in over 500 companies. So you have a very particular approach to venture capital and investing, which we'll get to. But I want to talk about some other stuff first.
You got, actually, it's over 900 companies at the moment, but maybe only 500 that are still alive.
You're invested in 900 companies?
Well, not necessarily me personally, but the firm, yes.
I hate to say this, Dave, but it does sound a little fuzzy. I can't quite understand everything.
Okay.
That sounded a little better just then.
I'm just holding the mic up to my mouth on the headset that I'm using.
That's perfect. Is that okay if you do that?
Sure.
Okay.
This is fine for me.
So your firm's invested in 900 startups, and I want to get into your background for a while. But first, let me ask, when you're invested in 900 startups, what do you feel is the actual – there's so much diversity. What do you feel is the actual, alpha there? Aren't you just going to follow basically stock market returns in that case?
No, I don't think so. I think we're still quite selective. For some folks, they may feel like 900 companies in the last 5 years isn't being selective, but given that there's probably hundreds of thousands of companies being started every year, and we're probably one of the most active investors in the world. We did about 300 investments last year. We first checked new investments last year. But we still have a pretty selective process. We still screen, probably close to 1,000 companies every quarter for our applications, and we only accept 30. So,
wow.
At least in that regard, we have a pretty high filter. But the reason that we do a large number of investments is that, the biggest companies are usually outliers and don't show up for anything more often than 1% to 2% of the time. And it also provides more kind of predictability for what goes on. we're very early investors, usually accelerator and seed stage, and attrition rates are high. So in the long run, we probably expect that only 20 to 30% of our companies ever make it to some kind of exit, and probably only that 5 to 10% make it to a very large exit.
Okay, I'm gonna get back to that because I think that high attrition rate is very interesting on a personal level. But let me ask you about your personal side. So how old were you when you started 500 Startups?
Well, I guess when we officially got it started 4 or 5 years ago, I was probably just shy of 44. I think I probably turned 44 within a week after we did the first closing for the fund, the first set of investments.
So you were 44, and a lot of people send me emails, and I don't know if maybe you get the same emails. A lot of people send me emails, oh, I'm 27, and I don't know what to do with my life. I feel like a failure. I feel like killing myself. And it's just, a lot of people feel that way in their 20s, in their 30s. When they hit 40, like I remember my 40th birthday was like the worst day of my life. I felt like a total failure. And, you wrote this blog in 2012. I think you were about 46 years old. And there's one paragraph I'll read back to you. So you wrote this. So after 20 years in the Valley, I had only made a little bit of money, had some modest accomplishments as a programmer, an entrepreneur, and a marketer. Meanwhile, my peers at PayPal had gone on to create incredible businesses like LinkedIn, YouTube, Yelp, and Yammer, and other kids half my age were seemingly even more ambitious. Most folks thought I was a decent fellow, but over the hill with my best days behind me. And it was almost from that moment on that's how I started hearing from you as just an incredible, successful venture capitalist. Like that was like a turning point when you kind of called your own bottom in a weird way.
Yeah, well, I would say my rough years were probably, at various different times, but certainly between 2005 and 2010 was a lot of, mental challenges and demons. I think I used that term also in the blog post that I was sort of facing.
Like what mental challenges? Like what was going on? What happened in 2005?
Well, I think just, when you come to Silicon Valley, you're competing against, probably the best folks on the planet in a lot of ways. Certainly working at places like PayPal and others where, I had a lot of friends and a lot of people that I knew personally even before they had been hugely successful. And, you just hold yourself up to that mirror and you're like, wow, I'm not Michael Jordan. And I think a lot of us in the Valley thinking that we're Michael Jordan. I came to the Valley about 25 years ago, and I had done very well in relation to some of my peers at the time. But I think there's just always, higher standards and higher levels of accomplishment that you run into when you, growing up against some of the top entrepreneurs and other investors in the Valley.
Okay, but
so it's a difficult sort of story to hold yourself up to the standards and still try and be achieving. And I was, eventually when I wrote that post, I had been for 20 years without necessarily a huge amount of successes.
And okay, I want to ask you a couple questions about that. First off, everybody can compare themselves to the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Larry Pages and say, "Oh, I didn't make it." But you also can compare. You were comparing yourself to basically the entire PayPal mafia that started YouTube, LinkedIn, and all those guys. And then you worked at Intel, Microsoft, Facebook, PayPal, Mint, Odesk. You worked everywhere. You also built and sold a company, but you said it wasn't like a huge deal. So how did you deal with? Forget the Larry Pages of the world because they're like beyond. But how did you deal with how did you deal with the basic envy that, oh, this kid just worked next to me at PayPal in a cubicle, and now Google just gave him $500 million?
Yeah, well, to be more accurate, I think Chad and Steve Joward sold the company for $1.5 billion. I don't know exactly how much they took home. I think it's different though when you're, there's a lot of people who probably know of Mark Zuckerberg or know of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and other people. And that's a little bit more distant comparison. I think it's quite different when you actually know those people and work with them before they became, super famous. Like Chad Chad and Steve and John would be people that I worked with at PayPal and hung out with at lunch and play football around with.
Yeah, like you could, literally, you ate lunch with them, and you could have said, "Hey, let's start off this video sharing company." You could have been in that conversation.
No, in fact, I mean, I've got some of the early iterations of YouTube in. Gosh, I think it was April 2005. Joe had actually sent me some of that stuff. I was working at a different company, but it wasn't like theoretical. I was probably one of the first 1,000 people that used LinkedIn and used YouTube and used Twitter. So you kind of did have that opportunity. You were on the ground floor, and that's why I think it's a lot more real when you realize, hey, these people are really amazing, and I'm not so amazing.
Well, okay, but you are amazing, right? You've done a lot of amazing things. So what I'm curious, what's amazing to me is how you move past that point when you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm at the center of the universe, but somehow the explosion, the Big Bang is not happening for me. And it happened for the guys right next to me. Like everybody around me it's happening to, but not me. So how did you get past? I personally would feel envious at that point. Like, how did you get past that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly the journey that I sort of took was a weird one. For me, it was very helpful later in life to have gone through those things, but I don't know if I was rationalizing it. I had spent time.
Nobody ever rationalizes it that way. Nobody ever says, 6 years from now. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, I spent time doing a couple different types of work. One as a programmer developer, one period as an entrepreneur, one period kind of marketing and biz dev, and then probably a bit of time as an angel investor. And I think I kind of kept looking for where's an area that I think I actually am doing well at. Probably between 2005 to 2010, I still, at least up until 2008, but mostly doing angel investing as a recreation. I started trying to get 500 up and down in 2008, right in the middle of financial crisis. So that was not the best time to be raising.
Another big stroke of luck for you.
Yeah, well, the stroke of luck was really that, Sean Parker had been asking me to come over to Founders Fund, and that was my plan B. And so I had a really unique opportunity when the rest of the financial world was, crashing down around everyone's ears. I could jump into venture capital in Q4 2008. And, I guess I felt at the time this was kind of one of I don't want to say my last shot, but it was an opportunity to, try and make investing a career as opposed to, a recreational pastime.
Because you had made, and Dave, sorry to interrupt, but you had made a little bit of money, so you had opportunity to invest a little bit here and there in some companies as an angel investor. Yeah, between 2004 and 2008, I guess, as I was leaving PayPal and after, I probably did about 13 personal investments, about $300,000 in total. At least some of the money that I had made at PayPal, I didn't make a huge amount like other folks, but I probably got, $500,000 to $1 million that I used for, putting money down on the house, and I had some left over that I didn't really know exactly where to put, but I kind of thought I was modestly good at picking startups and had, that was at least a fun area for me to put that money to work. So I was 13 companies in 4 years between 2004 and 2008. 3 of those eventually ended up working. SlideShare, Mint.com, and Mastery all eventually got acquired by various companies for a little over $100 million each. And so 3 companies out of 13 ended up performing quite well. And that was where I sort of felt there was some, confidence in trying to make investing more of my place to make my mark. And then, again, though, so you're doing some angel investing, but again, you were comparing yourself, and you admit this in the post. You're somewhat comparing yourself again to these guys who it seems like magic what's happening to them. Like that's the only way I can describe it. And you must have felt like the magic was not hitting you in some way. Like, and I'm just wondering again. Like, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like, my junior high school summer camp roommate is a seed investor in Uber, and
right.
it makes me, I can't help it. Like, I think I'm a good guy and I work hard on myself, but I can't help but think, wow, I could have been in that room too. And, it's difficult.
I think, again, a more personal story and direct story is Travis asked me. So I met Travis before he started Uber, invested in Uber, really.
Dave, sorry, can you speak Can you speak a little bit more into the mic?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I was going to say, again, this was, not a theoretical story. I met Travis before he became an investor and eventually CEO at Uber. I got an email from Travis in June of 2010 about investing in seed round. We talked about it, and I ultimately decided not to do it, which was, probably the single biggest fuck up in my investing career.
Okay, if you had, what was your average investment size at that time?
Well, I was just getting the investment, the firm started at that time. If I'd made it as a personal investment, it probably would have been, between 10 to 20,000. If I'd done the investment out of the fund, it probably would have been 50 to 100,000.
Okay, so
even if it'd only been 10,000 personally, I probably would have been worth 10 million. If I'd done, 100,000 out of the fund, it probably would have been worth 100 million.
So that's a pretty big miss, and it's like Warren. But to be fair, it puts you in the same category as Warren Buffett. Like his biggest failures, he admits, were not the things he invested in that then lost money, but the things he didn't invest in.
Oh, all the time. Yeah, I don't really look back and worry too much about, making investments that didn't pan out. That happens all the time. It's really missing the big opportunities, especially the ones right up to your nose.
Yeah, and so before 2005, you did kind of, you had a consulting company or a software company in the mid-90s. You sold it. What was happening there?
Right. Yeah, I don't know if that was really a startup experience. It was kind of more of a small business experience. But, a consulting business that I've been doing independently, gradually turned into a larger larger team of people. I think at our height, we were probably about 20 people, maybe 2 or 3 million in revenue. But that was kind of my first real business that I was doing. I kind of made this gradual transition from engineer to, project manager to eventual business owner. And I learned a lot, but I probably made a lot of mistakes. And, the acquisition was really more because we were having challenges and, we really needed to find an acquirer. It was a very small, almost talent-based acquisition, and eventually ended up being not, terrible. It was a $500,000 kind of exit, but it certainly wasn't anything to compare to, running a larger business. And I probably would not consider it to be successful, except to the extent that I didn't go bankrupt.
Yeah, that's always good, not to go bankrupt, particularly in the mid-90s when everyone else was getting rich.
Yeah, and again, I had friends who, started companies that ended up getting, acquired for $50 to $100 million, and then, the companies that acquired them went public and went on further. So, there were several acquaintances who were, huge winners in the late '90s, and throughout that period of time. So again, brushes with greatness, but no personal wins.
I'll tell you what I'm going to guess was your mistake with the consulting company is that you probably were profitable or close to it.
Probably what?
My guess is you were probably profitable in your mid-90s company or close to it.
Well, no, I think we were modestly unprofitable, but, to the tune of maybe making 1.8 or 1.9 million in revenue on a $2 million expense budget. So I should have just figured out some financing capital, and it was not a bad small business, but it wasn't really insane thing with the startup scene. Although we did work for a lot of startups and, a little bit of working for Netscape and a couple of other companies in the early years. So I got to see some of that stuff happening.
So you should have like somehow changed your service into a product, IPO'd and lost $50 million.
Or I should have just joined Microsoft or joined Intel or joined Yahoo or joined Netscape.
Yeah.
I think, but that's all right. I mean, I sort of felt like I got some very interesting experiences. And, those have served me very well. I think having been on the engineering end and the marketing side and the investment side have all been very helpful experiences now as VC firms to figure out, what's in people's heads, what do they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you must have had having any experience. I think a lot of investors and venture capitalists, this is what I see. because they have no experience running or starting companies, they actually are not very good venture capitalists. I mean, they spread the money around, but they don't really know what they're doing, I find, operationally.
Yeah, I think you're certainly seeing that with a lot of the, today's angel investors and seed fund managers tend to come more from the operational side. I think if you're doing later stage investment at Series A or certainly Series B and beyond, then I think it becomes more of a financial, focused set of activities. But a lot of what we end up working with companies on is really around product development and marketing, and those are areas that probably are best served having had some operational experience on programming or design or marketing or sales.
And so you also seem to have some interest in expanding globally. Like you have a lot of it's almost like you're franchising your VC firm. Like, and you have offices in all these different countries. You have a significant percentage invested around the world.
Yep. Yeah, I think that, from the beginning, we had an interest in, having a little bit more global field of view. Certainly the people on the team also, come from different countries. And, some of that I think is because we feel like the investment opportunity around the world is going to be a really big one, especially over the next 10 to 20 years. But some of it was also just personal interest in getting a chance to learn about different geographies. And we've kind of woven that into strategy, but I would say some of it's personal interest, some of it's, economic strategy.
Well, it seems like in Silicon Valley, it's probably, my guess is it's hard to get cheap valuations, where if you go to like Mumbai in India, you're probably going to get dirt cheap valuations on decent companies in a billion-person market.
Yeah, I mean, I think valuation is part of the story, but it's not just getting it at low valuations. I think it's really also seeing big opportunities globally that most other people in the Valley are really not paying attention to. And not to say that the strategies here don't make sense. I think there's just, huge businesses that are being created in the Valley every day. And for a lot of folks who are investors in the Valley, there's really no good reason to, move more than a 30-mile radius between, San Francisco and San Jose. But there's, obviously some very, very large markets that are fast growing opportunities around the world. And whether or not, they're going to birth the next Facebook or Twitter, they might, create very, very large companies that do have, large, economic, outcomes. And those could be in India, those could be Latin America, those could be Southeast Asia or the Middle East. So we felt like there's, really good reasons to be investing in those markets, not just for low valuation, but there's really just more broader universe of opportunity that people here weren't taking as much of a look at.
So back to the 2005 to 2010 period, like again, I sort of feel like a lot of people go through that experience of feeling that I'm not good enough, or I've somehow failed to find my purpose and goal. Like what, you sort of kind of said to yourself at some point, well, I'm pretty good at investing, so this is what I'm going to try to do. And you stuck with it. How do you think people can get to know what they're good at? And you sort of figured this out at what many would consider a fairly late age.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was really early 40s. And, I had already spent 20 years in the Valley and probably 2 or 3 different careers. And, not to say that I didn't feel like I was a pretty good programmer, pretty decent entrepreneur. Maybe I was, pretty good at marketing in various capacities. It just didn't feel like I had found, hit my stride in any of those. But really, I sort of really enjoyed the investing side. And again, I kind of had a little bit of a unique opportunity there because I had done both the engineering and marketing side, and there weren't that many people doing investing who had both disciplines. So that, was where I kind of said, well, let's try this again. Try, figuring out what career was going to fit. And it was very gradual, I think. Between 2004 and 2008, I was mostly just doing part-time investing while I was still operational in a few other roles at Mint and helping with other companies. I think in 2007, 2008, I was like, okay, let's try and put together a fund. Unfortunately, the first, time at it was right when the market was crashing. And so that became challenging. But Sean gave me a shot, with Founders Fund, Sean and Peter. And, I think that was kind of where things really started heading my way. You could maybe point to some of the conferences or things that I'd been doing before that, and maybe the Facebook class I taught at Stanford with DJ Fogg. But it really felt like when I first started investing in Founders Fund as a full-time sort of, focus, that's when I think felt like doors started to open.
Well,
certainly 2 years later when we got. Go ahead. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about that. Like, I see you all over, Twitter and, to some extent Quora and certainly on like TechCrunch. You're a very, at least on the internet, in social media, you're very social. And my guess is even more powerful than your investing skills were probably your social skills. Because it seemed like you, and in Silicon Valley, that seems very important. Like, you probably built up a very good network. Like, you sort of act like casually like, oh, Sean Parker gave me a chance. This is Sean Parker, like the number 2 guy at Facebook. Like, he doesn't give everyone a chance. He gave you a chance.
Yeah, I think I owe him a big debt of gratitude.
Did I hear you say Sean and Peter, as in Peter Thiel?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah,
again,
so
I called my buddy Bill Gates and Larry Page, and we flew on a UFO together to Mars. And
well, I mean, I worked for Peter twice, a little bit, for 3 years at PayPal, and then 2 years or a year and a half, I guess, at Founders Fund. But I don't have a high bandwidth relationship with Peter. I just have I've probably in the 10 or so years, maybe now a little bit longer that I've known Peter, I probably had 3 or 4 really substantial long conversations. One of them was when I interviewed at PayPal. I think one was when he left left PayPal to do something else, and then a couple times when I was working at Founders Fund. He's an amazing person, and I maybe just name dropped him as if I see him every weekend, but that's not really the case.
But still, though, it's the power of because you said there's going to be this 80% attrition rate anyway. Like, most startups are going to fail. It's really the power of the network and how you build a personal network that is going to give you opportunities in the long run. These are the seeds that you planted from 2000 to 2010.
Yeah, and even before that, I would say I had always, done a lot of community user group work and, conferences. I've probably been doing, user groups and conferences in the Valley for 25 years, at least since the early 90s. And
so let's.
I think.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The point that you made that I think was right. Probably the other thing that was notable was some of the talks and presentations I did, probably starting around 2005 or 6, were around, some of the challenges I've experienced at PayPal, also at Simply Hired, and I started doing this talk called Startup Metrics for Pirates, I think around maybe 2006 or 2007, and then I started doing some other talks and presentations that got some visibility from SlideShare. So I think there was a good bit of social media connectivity, and I don't know if I was really doing it intentionally at first.
Okay, let me reel that back. Dave, let me reel that back for a second. You said earlier you taught a class at Stanford about Facebook. So again, it's not like a casual meetup. It's a class at Stanford you were the lecturer at. Like half the class is going to go on to start like billion-dollar companies, and you were the teacher.
Again, it was a very unique opportunity, and BJ Fogg was a friend of mine who had been part of adjunct faculty at Stanford. I don't know how many people get to teach a class at Stanford as their first teaching opportunity. That was very sort of different, and just because of the timing, we kind of caught lightning in a bottle there. Facebook had just launched platform. This was fall of 2007, I think. And we had some really bright students, and they did the amazing things. I think we just put together a class and an opportunity that gave them a door to walk through, and And you're right, there were some amazing companies that came out of that. Certainly one, that's still today doing quite well called Share Through, that was started by some of our TAs and students, and a few others that were, acquired for decent sums. So it was a really amazing opportunity. Some really great people came out of that, and that was sort of a stepping stone to a lot of other things.
Yeah, so you had done all of this, and in your post, you're still kind of feeling, maybe because Silicon Valley, the bar is so high, you're still feeling this level of mediocrity. Like you said, you weren't feeling amazing, and but it was all these combinations of things, and I would say the strongest was 25 years of building a network that allowed you to basically create this enormously successful and well-known VC company that's still growing. Like every
Right.
time I read a new news article, you raise more money and invest in more companies.
Yep. Well, that's our job.
So so given the huge attrition rate, and by attrition, basically means, it's a nice way of saying companies are failing. So I spent some time as a venture capitalist, and one thing that I really hated about it was you don't really get a chance to spend time with your good companies. You spend a lot of times answering calls from the companies that are basically about to go out of business because they're terrified, and you feel bad. At least I felt bad for them. I want to hold their hand a little bit. Like, how do you deal with all the failure that you have to deal with still?
Well, I think we have to be somewhat disciplined in where we spend our time. We try and be helpful. A lot of what we're trying to build at 500 is not necessarily, the typical VC relationship where people sit on boards and, maybe have 5 companies that they're interacting with or managing. In our case, we have, hundreds. What we try and build is a large community of founders and mentors, and really a set of platforms that they can use to help each other. But yeah, you're right. We run into a lot of failure pretty much constantly, and we can't. We have to be straightforward. We can't afford to spend time with the 300 to 500 companies in our portfolio that are not working. We have to spend time with the 100 or so, maybe 200 that actually have a shot at really large outcomes. But we try and provide a platform where everyone benefits from that, at least to some extent.
Okay, so let's say
I think understanding the numbers really drives that approach. I think after spending 5-6 years as an angel investor and another 5-6 years as a VC, doing a really high volume strategy, we have a practical approach to what the numbers look like, and we are designing for scale, but we still have to focus on the things that are working.
So let's say I'm one of the 300, 400, 500 who are going to fail, and I call you up and I say, Dave, I'm really depressed. I have to tell you this is not working out. I'm going bankrupt, and I don't know what to do next. Like, what would you tell me?
Well, I don't think most of the folks are going bankrupt. Probably what they are facing is, in different stages, but at least the companies that we work with, they probably have raised $500,000 to $1 million. Maybe some of them will raise more than that. And they're probably running out of cash, and they're getting down to their last 3 to 6 months worth of cash. In some cases, we're able to help them find, exits either on the talent acquisition side. Sometimes, they shut down the company and they go join one of our other companies. Sometimes we tell them, hey, just, give it a rest and go take a vacation and come back and try it again when you're recharged. I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a few cases where there's a few cases where we might write a second check to give them a little bit more runway, but we're not a big investor. Our typical, check size is around 100,000. Most of the times we're the smaller or smallest investor in a lot of the rounds that we do. And so usually there are other larger investors who are really the primary person that, invested in the round or that has a board seat. And I think they have, probably a lot more responsibility in how the company does a wind down or, helping them find dry land. We try and be helpful in those situations, but we can't bridge companies that are failing and really, be effective in what we're trying to do for our investors and make a return. And we're transparent about that. I think we tell all of our companies, whether they go through our accelerator or seed program, that we're generally not going to be leading your next round, and we might participate. But they have to be successful and viable businesses for us to really, put more money into them.
So I want to ask you what kind of companies you invest in, but before that, what do you think about I sort of have this theory that nothing is predictable, and so you look at companies like Twitter, which was originally Odeo. You look at companies like Google, which originally had no concept of AdSense, when they first started. You look at companies like Groupon,
Sure.
which was like an email marketing list for charities. Instagram
Right.
was originally Bourbon. So all of these successful companies, they kind of started with ideas and smart people, but then they 100% changed their ideas in some cases.
Yeah, I think that's true. And PayPal had probably 4 or 5 different product focus areas before they found the one that really ended up working for them.
PayPal's
eBay and
PayPal's an enormous example. PayPal was like pay with your Palm Pilot, like what would now be considered the worst
Right.
idea in history.
Well, I think that might be coming back into vogue soon, but I think at the time they were probably 10 to 15 years early on mobile payments, and that was already the second or third iteration. They had been, the initial ideas that I think Max was working on were really around security software, and then later security software for monetary transactions, and then later, mobile payments, and then later email payments, and then later email payments for eBay, which was really where
Yes.
things kind of took off. So, again, there was 2 years, probably 3 to 5 business models, 2 years of shifting, strategies and iteration before they found something that really kind of caught fire. But that's pretty typical in that, great founders, I think, move the business to where, or move the product to where the business is. And less capable entrepreneurs don't ever make those pivots or don't make those fast enough.
So when you
But
evaluate
it's not to say that you can't find success. I do think that there's, within the areas that PayPal was initially focusing on, eventually financial transactions became a focus. Eventually small business sellers became a focus. And that's where they found the product opportunity and the market opportunity. So when we're generally looking for investments, it's not like somebody has a great piece of code and then goes find a customer. Usually we're looking at people who've got a functional product, they've got a customer base that they're starting to work with, and they still might shift around or, change some of the focus of the product in the market. But it's more likely the case that someone might be building a product for, parents or families, and they maybe start with something that might be education focused. They might end up with something that's safety or security focused. It's usually still within the same customer segmentation and same product family.
But it seems like what's more important are the people than the business plan, because you have to know you're investing in a person who's going to be able to pivot in the right ways.
I think that's true, but it's hard to know the person. I mean, particularly for us, 80% of our companies, probably more, are first-time entrepreneurs and don't have a huge track record. And so we don't have, a long history understanding whether they're great entrepreneurs or capable entrepreneurs. What we probably have some visibility into is what's the product that they built, what's the current level of customer focus, and maybe some indications of where, they've had success in the past, either working for a company or, building a product or going even, to some school that hopefully had, good credibility and branding. But it's still a lot of guesswork and, maybe it's informed guesswork. But we're wrong a lot. I mean, I think that's part of our strategy is just assuming that, we're going to make 20 bets a year per person, and, probably between 5 to 10 of those might be successful in surviving for longer than a year or two. And of those 5 or 10 are going to be the opportunities for us to have, larger outcomes.
So in terms of the math of that, this is where I also question the venture capital and even angel investing industries and private. This applies to private equity as well. Essentially, the exits happen when the stock market when the stock markets are reaching new highs. So it's very rare that you're going to have an exit when, let's say, in a 2008 or an early 2009. Of course, that's when the opportunities are, but that's when the opportunities are in the stock market as well, and they're much more liquid. And so would you make a comparison between venture capital returns and the S&P 500 on steroids? Like, let's say a leveraged S&P 500.
I mean, I certainly think there's correlation between the two markets, but, there's a lot of variation on that. There are still large outcomes that can happen during down markets. I think, PayPal went public in February 2001, February 2002, about 3 months after the 9/11, sort of disaster, and a lot of financial markets were still very, very shaky after the dot-com boom. People were extremely skeptical about PayPal going public at the time, but it went, fabulous as well. Mint.com, a company I was an investor in, got acquired in 2009 by Intuit for, I think $140 million. Which, and you could argue it could have been bigger in a boom period. Maybe that's true. But I think that was a very, tough time in the Valley. There wasn't a lot going on in 2009. People were still, very scared about the financial real estate market crash. So I think there's exits in a variety of different markets. Sometimes some of the best opportunities to invest happen during down markets. So I don't think it's all completely correlated. There's quite a bit of variety that happens within those worlds.
Okay, you've convinced me there. I'm a believer. So
but I think the thing that you point out, I was just looking at your bio, and it's funny, the numbers that you quote, you founded or co-founded over 20 companies and failed at 17 of them. I guess that means you had 3 out of 20 successes.
Yeah, so I fit your ratio. I'm like a one-man VC fund of myself.
There you go. A sequential portfolio.
Right. And my exits happened at market high, so it was tricky. But when you're,
but I think that those, whether or not they happen during market highs, I think you've got that ratio of 15%. That's probably about what we think about in terms of, what the meaningful exits in our portfolio end up, or at least the potential for exit. When I was making investments personally, out of the 13 that I invested in, 3 had successes. So again, sort of in that same, vein of most things don't work, a few things do.
So let's say,
but the problem is, if you don't have a portfolio approach to investments, I don't think you have any predictability in getting to those outcomes, whether they're up or down markets.
I agree with that. Like the one thing I learned for myself was, in terms of my streams of income and investments and so on, was to get heavily more diversified after all of these failures. Like that was my biggest financial lesson among personal lessons. But if let's say you're a person sitting in, I don't know, Ohio, and you're thinking about doing a startup, what would you recommend people start looking at? Like what kind of areas or sectors would you recommend startups to start, or potential entrepreneurs to start thinking about? What would you tell your children?
Well, I don't know that I want to pick, hot sectors. We generally don't try and jump on the trend of the day. I think there's new opportunities that are coming that are interesting. And,
like what?
Well, I think if you want to look out over the next 5 years, it seems pretty obvious that virtual reality is going to be an interesting sector. I think if you look at home automation products, that's certainly going to be a big, category. Hardware, software combinations in general, I think are going to be a big category. But I do feel like some of the enthusiasm in those sectors is a little overdone. And there's a lot of areas that are very unsexy that we think are great investments. And, most of those businesses are very transactional in nature. They're not the next Twitter or Facebook. They're like, a food delivery business where the internet marketing component is online. Or they're a SaaS product for businesses that's helping, provide a marketing or productivity tool and sold on a, monthly subscription basis. So those are the less sexy stories that don't necessarily get as much attention as the big ones. But I think if you look at successful businesses, the majority of them, at least on the small and medium side, are not necessarily breakthrough innovation. They're much more incremental innovation and improvements, on really basic things like just, what's overall margin, what's kind of the internet marketing and customer acquisition channel. A lot of the businesses being built today that are very successful, particularly, let's just pick a few examples like Uber or Airbnb. Those are not technologically, sophisticated. I don't want to say they're not sophisticated, but they're not, starting a taxi business or starting a hospitality, part-time hotel business. there's nothing technically crazily new about those businesses. They've been around for tens of years, if not hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It's really the addition of sort of mobile-based products or services or internet marketing and some, GPS components that drive the innovation in those businesses.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like if you're in Silicon Valley and you start a food truck that has a mobile app, you're going to be worth $50 million? But if you're in Cincinnati and you start a food truck with a mobile app, you're going to be worth basically what your sales for the day were.
I think the difference is whether you scale or not, and whether you can get access to the capital that helps you scale. I certainly do think you could start those businesses in different places. I might say the food truck business is more interesting in maybe the LA and New York markets, not necessarily in Cleveland. But I don't think you have to be in the Valley. I think the Valley is a place where people raise money, not build businesses.
Right. That's a good point.
There's a concentration of capital here that is unparalleled around the world. That's certainly true. There's a concentration of very large technical platform businesses that are here. But I think more and more the internet is a level playing field, and more businesses like AngelList and Funders Club and others like Kickstarter and Indiegogo are also leveling the playing field, at least for the first couple of rounds of access to capital.
I think that's incredibly important.
Series A and Series B. Yeah.
AngelList.
So you can start a business anywhere.
Yeah, and AngelList is kind of, you're right, has very much leveled the playing field. And I encourage listeners to check it out. So if I'm in Ohio and I have a business and I have customers, I have some software, I think I have a unique product and I solve some urgent problems, how do I basically get you to notice me?
Well, we actually have invested in a couple of businesses out of Cleveland, and
I'm not in Cleveland, by the way. I'm just using Cleveland as an example.
No, and I grew up in West Virginia, so you could replace Cleveland with any maybe of the not top 10 metros around the country, but numbers 20 through 100. We have an online application process for our accelerator programs that we run every quarter. We also have, an ongoing seed investment program that we, find opportunities again through AngelList, through direct referrals from our existing founders and mentors. I would say it's not as easy for someone to just email us cold and get, a meeting and a potential investment. That happens every once in a while, but most of the time the investments or the opportunity to take a look at are ones that were sent to us by other founders and mentors that we already know. And there's some level of screening or qualification that probably happens at that level,
right.
As well as internally once they look at it.
So in a weird way,
we get a lot of inbound.
In a weird way, you investing in 900 startups is a very clever way. Again, using what I'm calling now your prime skill, which is your networking ability. Like you basically have exponentially increased your network by investing in so many startups, and this becomes a filtering mechanism.
Don't tell anybody our secret.
No, nobody's listening to us. Don't worry. No one listens.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was maybe unintentional at first, but I think we realized within the first year or two, by investing in a very large number of companies, we were doing two things at once. We were, building a large community of founders, and we were also, doing a continuous marketing campaign by investing a lot of small checks in a lot of people. So both of those kind of, I think, gave us a really big platform to, have a voice to the startup community.
So again, let's say I'm in West Virginia now, and I have to use the state name because I can't name any city names in there. But let's say I'm in West Virginia,
Morgantown, Charleston, Huntington. There's a few.
Every state has a Charleston, I think, because I would have thought South Carolina there. But let's say I'm in Charleston, West Virginia, and I want to improve. I want to do what you did. I want to improve my networking, but I'm not out in Silicon Valley. What should I do today?
Well, I would probably say, write about what you're doing. And these days, probably, that would include multiple different channels that might be pictures on Instagram or Pinterest, might be videos on YouTube or other platforms. But I think, the way that I got started with a lot of things I was doing, one was running conferences and user groups. The other one was really writing online through a blog and doing, talks and presentations on SlideShare. And eventually, that sort of got to an audience of people that found what I was doing to be helpful. In this case, it was primarily entrepreneurs who were trying to figure out product and marketing strategies and ways to, present their companies to investors. But I think if you were building a business and, let's just take a look at Mint when we were getting started. Before we even got the product out the door, a lot of what we were doing was collecting personal finance content on the web through other bloggers and writers and producing some of our own and building an online community through, blog posts and maybe infographics and collecting other, great, content we found from other, writers on the web.
I think that's really great advice that to basically not limit yourself to your state, but writing and sharing and being transparent on the web to build almost an online community for yourself. And that becomes sort of the seeds of a network.
Absolutely. And that's easier than ever before. And, you're limited only by perhaps the language that you write in and the platforms you choose to distribute that content in. But there's people, who can produce content on YouTube or on blogging platforms or on Pinterest or Instagram that reach billions of people around the world.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I feel like we've maybe this is part of your networking skills, but I feel like we've kind of known each other for years back and forth. So it was great to finally meet over this podcast. But I hope eventually we sit down for a coffee or something and get to know each other. So thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. James, you're one of the most fabulous writers. I love reading your stuff. It's both hilarious and insightful at the same time. And,
oh, thank you.
Very, very personal, I think. So resonated a lot when I've read your stuff.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Dave. And once again, I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Hope to have a beer sometime soon.
Yes.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network at stansberryradio.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform is making it easier than ever to support Black-owned brands. When you go to walmart.com/blackandunlimited, you'll not only get to shop products from Black-owned brands, but also learn about founders like Janelle Stevens of Camille Rose, which specializes in products for naturally curly hair, or the Allison Devon, founder of Teespressa, and there are many more awesome products that you have yet to discover. It's all easy to find with Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform. Join in on celebrating Black brands today and every day at Walmart. We are Black and Unlimited. Visit walmart.com/blackandunlimited to discover more. That's walmart.com/blackandunlimited.